I can't believe that the day has finally come where I'm making this video. Hello friends, welcome back to Books and Tea Time. Today is part 1 of my Wind and Truth spoiler reading vlog. I am so excited to share this video, this time capsule of live reactions, updates, recaps of everything that goes on in these Stormlight books. If you haven't seen any of my Stormlight content before, basically for every book in this series, because they're all quite long. For every book in this series, I do a spoiler reading vlog where I share my reactions, thoughts, feelings, theories, sharing, and just basically all things reacting to the Stormlight Archive books. It is definitely a labor of love. It takes a lot of time to record these clips and then to edit them. But basically what I'm just going to say is this is obviously full of spoilers. So if you haven't read Stormlight yet, or you're not caught up to the 5th installment, Wind and Truth, I recommend saving this video for later if you plan on reading the series at some point. But if you don't, I totally understand. I'll catch you in the next one. This is for my Cosmere Stormlight fans. I am definitely not the most knowledgeable person on the Cosmere, not even close, but I love this world. I love these worlds. I love Sanderson's writing so much, and I absolutely adore this series. This book is obviously the longest in the series so far. It is over 1,300 pages, and I found that as I was recording my updates and my clips, they were getting really long. I had over 2 hours of footage for the first half of this book, and I got it down to a little over an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a 2-part vlog series just for Wind and Truth. So this video is part 1. As of today, I am officially halfway through this book. And if you're familiar with the book, you'll know that it's broken up into 10 days. So this is going to be the first 5 days and the prologue and all the interludes that are encompassed in those first 5 days. I am going to record my reactions to days 6 through 10 and the end of the book, edit all of that, and then I'm going to release these videos on back-to-back days. So when you're seeing this, if you're watching it on the day that it's released, the following day I am going to be dropping the second half. So I don't want to post anything online until I'm done because I'm very nervous that I'm going to get spoilers. I did start reading this in December, the week that it came out, and it is now April. I am definitely taking my time, but you know, we're not going to rush ourselves on this channel. I want to savor every moment. I'm going to send you back in time to December Addie, who has just held this book in her hands for the very first time. It's finally here. I'm finally holding Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson in my arms, and it weighs about as much as a newborn baby, I imagine. 1,300 pages. I'm gonna apologize in advance because I am ill right now. I have been sick for a few days. It's actually December 9th. This came out on December 6th. Friday, December 6th. I received it that day because I pre-ordered it. But I wasn't able to start it until last night because I have been very sick. But while I was sick and laying in bed, I did go back and rewatch all of my previous Stormlight vlogs for The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, and Rhythm of War to jog my memory a little bit on everything that's happening. Although I will say so far, let's talk progress here for a second. I'm on page 52, well 53 I guess. I've read this much, a little itty bitty taste. So far I will say Brandon Sanderson does a pretty good job of making sure that you're not totally freaking lost when you start this book. This is my first check-in. I can't believe it. So in this check-in, we're just gonna like break down how this video is gonna work, talk about my annotating system just to catch y'all up on that in case you didn't watch the first 4 installments or it's been a while since you watched the first 4 installments in my spoiler vlogs. Let's check her out in all of her non-dust jacket glory. We've got stunning images for our end pages of more of the heralds, I assume. Inside of the dust jacket, we've got our map of Roshar. Wind and Truth, where are we at? Okay, so I've read the prologue, and I think like the first 4 chapters after the prologue. So we'll get into what's happening in that in a second. But first and foremost, this book is broken down into 10 days, and then there's interludes between all of the 10 days. So my plan is that for every day I read, I'll do a check-in. These are the 10 days leading up to the battle between the champion of Odium and the champion of Honor, or Dalinar, or the Stormfather, the Almighty, whatever you want to say. Also, just talk some logistics here. This is the 5th installment and the end of the first arc. So this is going to be a 10-book series. We are on the last book in the first arc, so there's going to be a lot packed into here that I am not prepared for. I also read an article that I'm going to have linked down below that Brandon Sanderson did. Forget who wrote the article, but it's kind of just like a Wind and Truth, like what's going on. And he confirms some characters that are going to be in the second arc. So if you want to know about that, again, I'll have that link down below. But if you want to wait, I totally understand that. But he also said that after this book, he's taking a 6-year break writing Stormlight. Not writing in general. He's going to be doing a lot of other wild stuff, but he's taking a 6-year break in Stormlight. I don't know if that means it's going to be 6 years before book 6 comes out, or if it's going to be 6 years before he even starts writing book 6. I fear it's the latter. I haven't quite fully processed that statement. I feel like once I finish this book and I realize what that means, that I'm going to be in my mid to late 30s when I get to read the 6th book, it's disturbing. This is going to be explosive, is the gist of what I'm trying to get at, which I know all of us are already aware of, but I just have to say it out loud. Also, just as a reminder, I don't know if you can see, on the top of the book, I tag the perspectives with colors. So these yellow tabs are markers for like the parts and also the interludes, the prologue, the epilogue, things like that. Green is Kaladin and pink is Shallan. Those are the only 2 POVs that we've gotten so far, and it seems like that's the only POVs we're gonna get for day 1. I use orange for like Dalinar, Navani, and Adolin. Arista's playing in a box right behind me, so you can probably hear that. Apologies. I started using blue for Zeth, so we're hopefully gonna see a lot of that, because if I'm not mistaken, the flashbacks in this book are from Zeth's perspective, so we're gonna see a lot of blue. Basically, I go in and I tab perspectives part by part, so I tabbed all of the Kaladin and Shallan perspectives. Oh, let me show you my annotating key really quick. On the side of the book, I just have yellow, like neutral color tabs, but I highlight with a particular color according to this key different things in the book. So I have green is for Spren, all things Spren. Blue is for surge binding and like new age radiant stuff, so like the new wave of Knights Radiant. Orange, like a light orange, is for history. A darker, more like copper orange is for Fabrials and all of like the technology in Roshar. I have pink for gender and class comments between the different kingdoms. Red is Parshendi, listener, singer, things, their history, their culture, things like that. Purple is Shadesmar stuff. And then I just have a yellow for like other passages that I want to note. So let's get into the content. So exciting. So our prologue this time is from Gavilar's perspective. So interesting to finally get in his head, because oh boy, does he have some problems. So basically the gist of this prologue is you're seeing Gavilar in his last moments. What was he up to in the moments before, or the night of his assassination? The most important things is basically he is on the cusp of swearing the first ideal and becoming a Radiant. He's under the impression that by swearing that ideal, he will then become a herald. Like, he will replace one of the heralds. And he is trying to bond the Stormfather. And I will just say, like, this whole prologue, at this particular stage of the game, after we got Oathbringer, after we got Dalinar's flashbacks, after we get the explosive end to Rhythm of War, where, like, Navani bonds the sibling, Dalinar has bonded the Stormfather. It's just so interesting knowing everything that we know now to go back at this. Like, this is, like, brilliantly timed by Sanderson. But basically this whole thing is just Gavilar being super narcissistic and thinking he's gonna essentially ascend into immortality and godhood if he could just get the right words, right? So he keeps like saying things that he thinks are the right words, and the Stormfather's like, no, that's not it. You can't just guess. You have to know. There's a lot of that, a lot of back and forth where the Stormfather's like kind of low-key like, I chose the wrong person. You are clearly not made for this line of work, let's say. A really cool thing that sticks out to me is Gavilar shouts out that he has a secret scholar in his reserve from another world, which we find out is Vasher from Warbreaker, who we see in previous Stormlight Archive books. He's Zahiel, I think is how you say his name. There's a lot already being thrown around about Ba'ado Mishram, the grantor of forms, one of the unmade, how she basically accidentally created the Parshmen. He's talking to the Stormfather. He also meets with Staries and Nalin, the Herald with the crescent tattoo, Darkness. He goes by a lot of names. Basically, at the end, he finds out that one of the Heralds, Staries, has died, and that the Stormfather lied to him, which he was under the impression that Spren could not lie. So he is dying on the ground as he's having this revelation about, oh, the Stormfather lied to me. Spren can lie. What else has he possibly lied to me about? And just like that stark contrast of like, I am going to live forever. I am going to be this immortal deity too. I'm dying. And after shit-talking Dalinar a bunch in his head, and basically admitting that he has been low-key manipulating Dalinar and encouraging his alcoholism so that he can have control over Dalinar, at the end of the chapter, he basically decides, well, Dalinar is the person that I am going to have to pass over this knowledge to. So he tells the Stormfather to give the Voidlight Sphere to Dalinar, and the Stormfather's like, no, I'm never going to trust anyone in your family again. Which is so interesting because eventually he bonds Dalinar. So I have a lot of questions. Prologue done. Like I said, the only perspectives we've gotten so far are Kaladin and Shallan. And so Kaladin is doing okay. He is slowly finding some sort of flatline stability with his mental health. After the death of Teft, after this last battle, he's decided he is not going to participate in this battle of the champions. He's just going to take a back seat, work on himself, and we love to see it. The main thing that's interesting, well, there's two main takeaways so far from Kaladin's POV. First and foremost, I cannot take credit for this theory. My best friend, Marissa, who I have been reading this series with, she's way ahead and had finished it before I did. But she has a theory that Kaladin and Syl are going to become a couple. And she's had this thought for a while, since before Rhythm of War. We're getting a lot of that, okay? I don't know if it's because she said it, but I'm picking up on some vibes in this book. First of all, Syl is now presenting herself in the, like, Roshar world as a full-size friend, where like she used to be tiny, and she's like, you treat me different when I'm smaller, people treat me different. So like she's presenting herself as this full-formed woman, and she's got a glove on her safe hand, and Kaladin notices it and is like, that's different. And they're just like, I'm picking up on some vibes. The other thing is that Kaladin and Syl are about to go to Shinovar for Dalinar in order to talk to the Herald Ishar. And when they go to get that mission from Dalinar, they meet Wit and have a really interesting and very foreboding conversation with Wit, where basically Kaladin's like, why do I get the feeling one of us isn't gonna survive? And I don't want either of them to not survive. There's a moment where Wit references Sazed from Mistborn, who's my favorite Mistborn character. That was epic. Also, the wind is whispering to Kaladin some ominous things about the worst storm that's coming. I said there were two things about Kaladin's perspective, but now that I'm going back, there's apparently a lot more than that. He's trying to be mentally stable. The wind is talking to him. Still, things are happening. There's some developments. They talk to Wit, possibly for the last time. Shallan, who also went through some insane mental health developments in the end of Rhythm of War. is basically starting to remember and confront her past, where we find out that she had actually bonded a spren before Pattern, and that spren helped to manifest into a blade and protect her when her mom tried to kill her for bonding a spren. So her mother doesn't like that Shallan has bonded this spren, tries to like kill her, take a knife to her, and Shallan manifests Testament, her first spren, as a shard blade and kills her mother. So then she like sort of low-key breaks the bond, but she was a child, so we're learning that that bond was not cleanly severed like the other bonds of like Maya, who is Adelin's Deadeye spren that is like connected to his shard blade, and like her original Knight's Radiant. Like, we're learning a lot about intent and bonds and how, and words and all that, and how it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray area, especially because Shallan was a child when this oath was broken. So she's really worried. She doesn't understand why Testament doesn't hate her. And she's getting through that, processing that. She has fully absorbed Veil into herself, in a sense. So she's navigating this relationship between, like, her bond with Testament that's not really completely severed, and her more recent, formal, complete bond with Pattern. Basically, they are also talking to Wit through, like, a sort of telecommunications spren device situation, and they discover that they have to figure out how to access the spiritual realm and find the prison of Mishram, this unmade, because they think that by finding the prison and learning more about Mishram, they'll be able to uncover a lot about bonds, about how she, as this unmade deity, affects Roshar and affects the bonds between Spren and other beings, and just like a lot of things are in the balance and they need answers. So they're going on this very dangerous mission to try and reach the spiritual realm. Time isn't real there. Past, present, future are mixing. They don't know how to get there. So that's where we are right now. So I will hopefully check in with you after I finish day 1. Then we'll just move right along and see how long it's going to take us to read all 1,300 of these pages. Journey before destination, folks. Hello all. We are here for our next Wind and Truth check-in, and the first true milestone, because I have finally completed day 1. Get a little visual check. This is day 1 right here. We've made it this far into the book, and as you can see, I went through and I tabbed the perspectives for part 2 yet. I actually started part 2, but I'm not done with it yet. I'm just a little bit of the way into it, but I tabbed all of our perspectives so you can see there's a lot more variety, because the first day is just Paladin and Shallan's perspective, and then we're getting a lot of Dalinar, Navani, Adolin, we've got Zeth, we've got a little bit of Jasna, just a tiny little itty bitty bit, and then some Lift too, hopefully soon. I actually just got to the first scene that Lift appears in, and I was very excited. I guess let's start with Shallan's perspective. She and Adolin and Pattern, Maya, and Testament are all still in Lasting Integrity, which is the city of the Honor Spren, and they're waiting on Windrunners to come and pick them up and take them back over to Urtharu. And while they're waiting, she's talking with the Herald Kelek, and also with Notum. That's his name. So she's talking with Kelek, she's talking with Notum, and we're getting a little bit of information just about how, like, the Ghostbloods are looking for Ba-Ado Mishram, and now Shallan has made it her goal to get to the spiritual realm and find Ba-Ado Mishram before the Ghostbloods can. The Windrunners come to pick them up, and as they're carrying them to, like, the city where the Oathgate is so that they can get back over into Urtharu, they are attacked by a group of Heavenly Ones, and they're attacked while they're flying over, like, one of the bead oceans in Shadesmar. And so they're like falling into the beads. Adolin falls in, and Shallan dives in after him and is like trying to save him. And then while she is under, trying to not suffocate in the beads, she's attacked by one of the fused, and she swears another ideal and ends up stabbing. She doesn't end up killing him, but she ends up stabbing him, and like we just get this really badass Shallan moment where she's like, I'm gonna bend reality to my will, and I love her so much. I mean, I love Lift. As we all know, Lift is my little sweet baby bean, but Shallan is just the absolute shit. I love her so much. There's this scene too where Gallant, which is Adeline's horse is like galloping around with a bunch of music spren who in Shadesmar appear as sort of like horse-esque beings. And there was just this really interesting moment with it where it kind of inferred, I think, like Shallan maybe like had this internal thought that inferred that perhaps non-human creatures can bond spren, and that Gallant, Adeline's horse, had bonded a spren. So that's really cracking a lot of stuff wide open for me. This idea that non-human creatures have the ability to bond a spren, and like how that works, considering, you know, they can't necessarily speak the oaths in the same way, but like how might that work? I don't know, and just how spren interact with life in their environment that is non-human. And then eventually they make it to the gate, and the two spren who are operating the gate basically say that like for now they're going to let Shallan and Adeline and all of them through, but they have the ability to change their mind and are likely to change their mind, because the main big reveal at the end of this part in the Shallan perspective is that there is an army, a naval army crossing the sea in Shadesmar that is going to invade the Oathgate in Azir, which is where they are traveling right now. They're leaving Shadesmar through that Oathgate, and they notice on the horizon that there is a huge giant army that is basically sneaking through Shadesmar and going to pop up in Azir through the Oathgate and try to take over the city. They have to hurry back to give that information to Dalinar and to all of the other people in like the little coalition. Shallan is acknowledging that like when she gets back to Earther, she has to strike first against Mraize, so she's trying to get the drop on him, I guess, and get information that she can hold against him, and find out stuff that they are trying to find out before they can. Then in Kaladin's perspective, last time I talked to you guys, he had just talked to Wit, so he went in and spoke with Dalinar, and Dalinar has given him a mission that has several functions, but he's basically going to Shinovar with the goal of tracking down and speaking with the Herald Ishar, and hopefully learning something that might help Dalinar in this contest of champions. But he's also escorting Szeth there, back to Szeth's home in Shinovar, and Dalinar is hoping that Kaladin, who has had some mild success with helping other soldiers dealing with PTSD recover, he's basically hoping that Kaladin will be Szeth's therapist, more or less. Kaladin is like, are you serious? Because that's a tall order. And Dalinar's like, you know, do what you can. Kaladin mentions to him about like listening to the wind and all of that. So the wind is speaking to Kaladin and he's trying to listen. So there's all that going on. Kaladin has a little moment where he says goodbye to all of the members of Bridge 4. That's very emotional. And he's like just basically saying, you know, I'm really proud of you guys. And I don't know, I am happy that Kaladin is mentally stable right now, but mellow Kaladin freaks me out. I am not sure how to feel about it, because in like the back of my mind, I'm like, how long is this gonna last? And also, does mellow Kaladin, is this foreshadowing him dying in any way, shape, or form? Because I feel like I am the most nervous for Kaladin's death in this book. So he says goodbye to Bridge 4, and then he and Szeth and Syl ride the High Storm to Azir, and he there says goodbye to Shallan and Adeline, because they are like coming through the Oathgate as he is passing through on the High Storm. This scene, it's on page 114, and I've highlighted, and it's just so emotional. It's in Shallan's perspective as she is observing Kaladin hugging Adeline goodbye, and she's thinking, he followed it by hugging Adeline, and if she were the jealous type, she would have noted that Adeline's hug was longer than hers. And I wrote, what a beautiful bromance, as my little comment. Their bromance is the best thing in the whole world, and I love them so, so much. But what actually brought tears to my eyes is the Kaladin and Shallan goodbye, where she is telling him,
we started this, you and I, Radiance before anybody else.
And he says,
except Jasna and maybe Lift and perhaps
you and I.
She says,
we were there at the start. We meet at the end, like Adeline said, when the world is safe and Dalinar's done what he needs to do, we can all laugh and joke again.
And then she makes him promise, and he promises
drinks, joke, laughter at the end, I promise.
And it's just like, I need them all to have that. I need them all to have that moment. They have to meet again at the end, and they all have to be alive for it, or I'm gonna be very mentally unstable, okay? So yeah, basically part 1 ends with Szeth and Kaladin riding the High Storm, and Shallan and Adeline arriving back in Eartharu. And then we have 2 very short interludes that I did read already, so I'll include those here now. The first one is from the Herald Kelek's perspective. But basically, he decides to stay in lasting integrity and continue hiding from the Ghost Bloods instead of going with Adolin and Shalin to like get some sort of protection from them, and immediately is, I guess, like attacked or found or something or other. I don't know if they're Ghost Bloods. I think these are characters from the second era of Mistborn that I haven't met yet. So I read the first original Mistborn trilogy. I have not read Mistborn Era 2 or like the other spin-off like Secret History Mistborn series, which I'm slowly realizing that I need to, and that's probably going to be my next project after finishing Wind and Truth. So there are characters in Mistborn in this interlude that basically come and secretly imprison Kelek and say that they're gonna keep an eye on him as things are happening, but they name drop Kelsier from the original Mistborn trilogy, and so that caught my attention. And then they also find out that the little orb that Shalin was using to communicate with Wit and Mraize and like that Pattern used is a spren, and so the enemy has been listening to their conversation throughout all of Rhythm of War, so that's stressful and disheartening. And then the other interlude is from Odium's perspective, aka Taravangian, who has killed the old Odium and then ascended to the Shard of Odium and is now a god. And he's basically just talking to Cultivation and mourning that he can't stop all of this suffering, and he feels like even though he has ascended to godhood, he's like bound by this contract that Odium signed previously, like the old Odium Rays signed, and bound by the power, but he's like, you know, trying to be optimistic that he can save them. So yeah, that's where we're at now. We have finished officially day 1, and I have, like I said, started day 2, so once I finish that, I will come back and talk to you guys. I'm probably going to read tonight. I'm back in my flow because I have a new system. As you have noticed, this book is gigantic, so it's hard to read it comfortably, and also because I'm annotating it. So I bought the ebook, and I have been reading the ebook and highlighting things just as I'm reading, and then intermittently I will go and like sit down at the table, like the dining room table, and go back and like highlight and color code and make notes. And I'm also finding that that's helpful for me like preparing for these check-ins. According to my e-reader, I'm 15% of the way through. Day 1 is down. Peace out. I'll talk to you later. Hello, friends. I'm back, and your girl has updates. So last time I talked to you, I had just finished day 1. I've actually just finished day 3. I'm a little behind on my updates, but today, right now, I think let's go over day 2 together. There's a lot. And then I think tomorrow morning I'll hop on and update you on day 3 because day 3 was a lot shorter. I have 2 sides of a notebook page of notes to go over here with you. First and foremost, day 2, let's kick it off. The beginning of day 2 is like basically like after 12 has struck in Urithiru, and we get perspectives real quick from like all of the monarchs as they're all getting news that they have to come and meet about these impending forces coming to invade all the different cities that they're trying to invade. The main thing that we learn there is we get a little Wit and Jasna bit. Wit finds out that he lost 3 minutes and 27 seconds. So Wit has discovered that somehow Odium, aka Taravangian as Odium. I know. Do you hear her trying to talk over me? Do you have something to say, ma'am? Wit has discovered that somehow Taravangian as Odium stole his memory for that little snippet of time, so he's concerned about that. But now he's like bouncing back from that a little bit, which is good because I was nervous that that was going to like really cause a lot of problems. The Council of Monarchs is coming together. We've got Dalinar and Navani, Adolin there, Queen Fen from Thalanaw, Yanagon from Azmir, and like all of his advisors or whatever the hell. Wit and Jasna are there, obviously, and they're all coming to figure out like, okay, what's going on and how are we going to deal with all of these armies that are headed to our doorstep, because we've got Thalen City, who is about to be attacked. We've got Azmir, who's about to be attacked via Shadesmar through the Oathgate, and then also the Shattered Plains. So they've got 3 places that they have to defend, and Wit also reveals that he missed a loophole in the contract between Odium and Dalinar that Dalinar made when Odium was raised. And basically, if the capital city of one of the territories in Roshar is captured by the Singer army before the 10 days leading up to the Battle of Champions is taken, they get that whole territory. The whole point of this contract is like, like at the end of the 10 days, if you have the territory at the end of the battle, that is like the territory you get to keep. Via this loophole that Wit has found, Taravangian is finding out a way to basically take 3 cities, Phelan City, Azamir, and the Shattered Plains, and then get those 3 territories. So they have to figure out a plan for that. Also, at this meeting, Wit turns out he doesn't know that it's Taravangian that has become Odium, but he like announces to everybody like, okay, this is not my old enemy. This is not Ray's. He must be dead. Whoever took his power is a genius, and we gotta be scared. Wit announces all of that stuff, and then they decide that Jasna is gonna go with Queen Fen and some of their forces to defend Phelan City because they're still recovering from the battle that happens at the end of Oathbringer. They also like don't really have a navy anymore, so Jasna's gonna go and help them. Adeline is gonna go with Yonagon and a small army to defend Azamir because there's a part of their army that is like I think 3 days away from Azamir that's gonna try and get to them as reinforcements on land, so they just have to hold it for a couple days. Then Sigzil and the Windrunners are going to defend the Shattered Plains. So that's their plan, to hold off all of these forces until the 10 days are up because they don't want to give up these territories. And then Dalinar and Navani are obviously staying back in Urthru because Dalinar has to prepare for this contest, which brings me to the next point here. Cultivation rolls up. One of the 3 gods of Roshar, she just rolls up to Dalinar and is like, listen, you need to go to the spiritual realm to get answers. Yes, I know, it's crazy because basically his visions that he's been having via the Stormfather is sort of how he is hoping to interact with the spiritual realm and like access the past and get some answers, because cultivation is like, look, the Stormfather's not being honest with you. You still got a lot of information. You got to keep walking this path that you started or you're not going to be able to win, because ultimately Dalinar's just a dude that's about to fight a god, and that's not going to go well for anybody. Dalinar shares this information with Jasna and Wit and Navani, and they hatch a plan to experiment with sending Dalinar and Navani to the spiritual realm. The Stormfather is not happy about this, but ultimately he gives in. My interpretation of it is he just can't bring himself to tell Dalinar what has happened because he is for some reason ashamed of it. But Dalinar also is throwing around the idea of accessing the remnants of Honor's power in the spiritual realm and then becoming a god, becoming Honor. The Stormfather's not crazy about that because it's like blasphemy. Navani's not crazy about it because she's like, why does it have to be you? Can it be somebody else? Dalinar doesn't even really want to do it, but he's like, someone's got to. I'm showing up to a gunfight with a butter knife essentially right now, Navani. Like, I don't know what else to do. They decide to go on this experiment, and Navani's gonna go with him to help like do her thing, I guess, of keeping track of like all the information that they're seeing and like being his right-hand woman. Real quick, before we get into the actual experiment itself, because this is like them preparing for the experiment, doing a thought experiment before the experiment, if you will. We get a little bit of Szeth, get our first Szeth flashbacks, and we're also getting like present timeline Szeth perspectives as he and Kaladin are arriving in Shinovar. I knew that the Szeth flashbacks were gonna be sad. He's not a super mentally stable dude. It's hitting hard, folks, okay? Let me tell you, it's not going well. Basically, when they arrive in Shinovar, he tells Kaladin that essentially there is an unmade in Shinovar that the people have accepted. That's why they sent him away and called him truthless and all that, is because he said there's an unmade here, and they told him like, no, that's a lie. And so now he's coming back to cleanse Shinovar, which we still don't really know what that means. As of day 2, as far as his flashbacks, he was a farmer's son, or like they were like shepherds, herdsmen, dealing with the land. He really liked to dance. This poor little happy bean just wants to dance, and then his life goes to shit. But like the whole thing with Shinovar is that it is blasphemous to walk on stone because it's like a creation of the Spren. But there are people in their society who are like the soldiers that subtract because they kill people that can walk on stone, which is what Szeth eventually becomes. But just like at the beginning of the book, we're seeing like his family interacting with a small stone, and like it's a really big deal. And then invaders come. So that's really all we get from the Szeth flashback, and he and Kaladin are trying their darndest to deal with each other. Kaladin's like,
I just want to help you.
and Szeth's like,
I don't need help. I'm emotionally damaged, but I'm supposed to be this way.
and then Syl's like,
Come on, Kaladin, you can do it.
it's just really funny. Their dynamic between Syl and Kaladin and Szeth and Nightblood is hysterical. It's very entertaining, but it's also like balancing it with a lot of emotional stuff that's going on, as Kaladin's like, you know,
Say more about this traumatic history that you've had.
and Szeth is like,
No.
what's going going on with Shalyn? When she gets back from Shadesmar, she's like, okay, I have to make the first move against Mraize and the Ghostbloods. She and her team basically infiltrate a Ghostbloods meeting, and they're hearing like some of their plans. But Mraize and the Ghostbloods, I mean, they're divided about their course of action. Like, most of the people are like, we need to figure out how to send Stormlight off world for this like big bad leader that we have that is maybe a god from another planet. Haven't quite sussed that out yet. And Mraize is like, no, we have to find the prison of the unmade Ba-Ado-Mishram. And so they are planning to kind of like piggyback off of Dalinar going into the spiritual realm when he creates the perpendicularity and enters the spiritual realm. They're gonna kind of sneak in behind him because they have bonded unmade Spren. And apparently unmade Spren have like a method for navigating the spiritual realm. So they're relying upon that in order to navigate the spiritual realm. While Shalyn is like in disguise in this meeting, Mraize is like whipping around anti-light, void light, which can kill Spren. He eventually does get found out, and they poof disappear into Shadesmar right as the Windrunner reinforcements roll up onto the scene, so they don't catch them. But Shalyn is like, okay, shit's hitting the fan. We have to be ready for when Dalinar's gonna open this perpendicularity. We have to be ready to stop them from following Dalinar in. So she goes and picks up Renarin and Rlain, which we'll get to in a minute, because they have bonded unmade Spren, and she's like,
what if you just come with me to the spiritual realm?
And like kind of bullies Renarin into it. But yeah, before we get into that, I just want to make one more side note. It's not like super important to the story, but it's so fascinating. When Navani takes a break really quickly to meet with some of her scholars, and they have figured out a way to domesticate flame Spren in order to work heaters and things. They give them what they call treats, and like they like talk to them and give them names and engage with them. And when they do so, it's like sort of like domesticating cattle. They're like farming Spren, I guess. So Navani is like talking to the sibling about it. She's like, you know, I know you're really against Fabrials because they enslave Spren. I don't know. It was just a very interesting interaction because the sibling is so anti-Fabrial, and Navani and her team are trying to find that happy medium of like moving forward and progressing as a society in terms of science and technology. So that was pretty cool. I just wanted to throw that in there. Now we're on to the second side of my notes here. I just have to take a moment to talk about Lift. She is befriending young Gavinor, and she teaches him how to swear on accident, and it's just like, she and Wendell are just such charming, hilarious, adorable additions to this world. She is still dealing with a lot of her internal stuff. She's resisting growing up, right? She's resisting puberty because of some trauma that she experienced in her past. She thinks her mom's still alive, and she fears that if she changes physically, her mom won't ever be able to remember her or find her again. So she's resisting all of the physical changes in herself, but she's also a kid going through puberty, and so she keeps like ogling all of the men. Like, she keeps ogling Sigzil as he's walking by, and Wendell is like,
I don't understand why you're so obsessed with men if you don't want to have boobs.
so charming and so funny. And I'm just like, you get it, girl. You get it. Renarin and Rlain are so in love. They definitely have crushes on each other, and I can't wait for them to smooch. Renarin, who is definitely coded as autistic, love to see the representation. We're seeing a lot more from his perspective, so we're seeing a lot more of that into the tech. He can see these visions, right? He doesn't know if they're true or not. They may come to pass, they may not, and that's very emotional and draining. Now that Rlain has bonded a Spren of the Unmade, he can also go into the visions. So we've already had a scene where they go into the visions together, and Renarin is like just so excited to not be alone anymore, and it's so sweet. The main part of their plotline, in addition to them, they see a vision and they see the face of Ba-Ado-Mishram, who apparently is like an evil god in listener singer mythology, I think. Shalyn comes up to them and is like, will you guys come to the spiritual realm with me so you can help me navigate what's going on? So they agree reluctantly to help her with that. Now for the big bang, the big end of day 2, we've got the experiment. So Wit is helping Dalinar open this perpendicularity so that he and Navani can go in. And then on the Shadesmar side, Shalyn is trying to defend the perpendicularity from Mraize, but they sneak in somehow. So then they're battling on the perpendicularity side in Shadesmar, while Dalinar and Navani are in the physical realm opening it. Essentially, Mraize stabs the perpendicularity with anti-light and blows a bunch of shit up. And so we don't really know what happens yet because we don't get any of their perspectives in part 3, by the way. Brandon, I see what you're doing. I have no idea what happened to them, but they all presumably get sucked into the spiritual realm. Lift and Gavinor are like hiding in basically an air duct and spying on Navani and Dalinar while they're doing the experiment. And when the perpendicularity goes boom, Gavinor slips in and Lift manages to keep herself out. And so then Lift and Wit realize what has happened. And they're like, well, we gotta lie to everybody, because if people realize that Navani and Dalinar have just been sucked into the spiritual realm and we don't know when they're coming back, shit's gonna really hit the fan. So they're like conspiring together, like, we have to lie. We have to lie our asses off and pretend that this just didn't go horribly wrong. The very last bit of day 2 is the Herald Ishar appears to Kaladin out of the blue in the evening one night after they have their meal and basically says, I'll talk to you after you help Szeth complete his mission that he has going on here in Shinovar. So that's the end of day 2. And then as far as the interludes, not a whole lot happens. The singer L goes to meet with Taravangian / Odium, and Odium tells him to gather an army in the Shattered Plains to try and take the Shattered Plains. And also, I think they were maybe talking about awakening another one of the Unmade. And then the other interlude is Odium's perspective. And basically, he's still just like, he's torn between these two parts of himself, fighting with his intellectual side and his emotional side. And he's trying to decide like which one he wants to be. And he's like, maybe I could let them both rule. He doesn't know what to do. And I don't know what to do with him. You know, Taravangian is so complicated that I don't want to hate him. Essentially, Cultivation is urging him to seek peace for Roshar, but he has plans to conquer the Cosmere. That is the end of my day 2 update. Like I said, I hope to be back on tomorrow to give you the day 3 rundown. Thanks for tuning into this update. Peace out. Hello friends. Okay, I am back as promised the following day to give you my day 3 check-in update for Wind and Truth. Hold on, I want to show you guys a little progress shot here. 1 second. This is where we're at. That's a good little chunk right there. Day 3, let's talk about it. So as I mentioned yesterday, day 3 was a lot shorter and it only had perspectives from Adolin, Szeth, and Kaladin. So let's start with Adolin because I feel like that's the quickest one. So Adolin arrives in Azamir. He's there to help fight the battle and to hold off the fuse that are coming through the Oath Gate. So he gets there and like they're just like, you know, setting up and getting everything ready. And at first there's a lot of tension between him and the leader of the army in Azamir. I think his name is Kushkum. From the perspective of Kushkum, he's like, okay, what is this little Alethi brat doing here and why is he gonna be in charge of everything? So Adolin is trying to like toe the line and like not like take over, but like he has fought against singers and fought against fused before, and so he's like trying to like slowly be like, I think this is what we should do, and like tiptoeing around that a little bit. And then honestly, the main thing that happens is they survive their first battle, their first encounter with the fused, and they're able to hold them off and the fused retreat back into Shadesmar. And so there's like a soft celebration of just like, okay, we made it past the first day, maybe we can actually do this. And then there's a little bit of reconciliation between Adolin and Kushkum, and he's like, okay, like maybe you were right, maybe fighting fused is a little bit different than fighting just regular soldiers. And there's also some like really darling moments between Maya and Adolin, because Maya has clearly in her past life been bonded to a soldier, and so like being back in the war camp and like talking strategy with Adolin is really bringing her to life, and they're able to communicate in his head just via thoughts, and it's really wonderful to see her sort of like coming into her selfhood a little bit. But at the end of day 3, she suggests to Adolin, what if I go via Shadesmar, because like she's in Shadesmar, she's not manifest in the physical realm because their bond is a little bit different than like the traditional Radiant bond, because she is a Deadeye Spren, and she's like, okay, what if I go and ask the Honor Spren to help us from this side, because the army is on that side, like the fused singer army is on that side. And Adolin's like, I mean, if you want to do that, then you can do that. And so she decides to go do that, and so he's fighting with a shard hammer, someone else's weapon. He's also like befriending Yanagon and like trying to, you know, give him, I think, what Adolin experienced as a young soldier coming into himself. He's like, you should, you know, practice with Shardplate. You should, you know, play Towers, which is this like strategy game that kind of seems akin to chess maybe. They're friends. He's treating him like a person, but a lot of Yanagon's advisors are like, well, you know, you're the emperor. You shouldn't do that. Then we've got Kaladin and Szeth who are in Shinovar, and they're trying to find Zeth's like homestead that he grew up in when he was younger. They find Zeth's home, and Kaladin is like looking around and realizing that, you know, they have a lot in common as far as their upbringings. Like Kaladin's like, his hometown reminds me of my hometown. As they are traveling through Shinovar, we are getting Zeth's flashbacks because he is slowly sharing his past with Kaladin. Let me tell you, Brandon Sanderson has already made the tears flow. Molly the sheep. I was tearing up. I was visibly and physically upset by the Molly the sheep chapter. The invaders come to Zeth's town when he's a kid, and so they go inland and try to, like, you know, hide there while the soldiers take over and handle the situation. And when they get inland, they realize that Molly, Zeth's favorite sheep, who he loves so much, and he like grabs her fur when he's anxious, she's missing. And his sister tells him, like, I don't want to worry you, but I know that you really like her and we can't find her. So he goes off by himself to try and find her. And when he goes off by himself, he goes back home to their homestead because he thinks that that's probably where she is. The soldiers who like are supposed to be defending Shinovar, they have, you know, beaten back the enemy, and the battle is over, and they are at Zeth's home. They have raided his dad's wine stores and are like drinking around a fire, and they have killed and are now eating Molly the sheep. And so that is obviously really traumatizing for Zeth. But then also, like, you know, he's talking to these soldiers and like telling them like, you know, why are you acting like this? Like, you know, you're not supposed to be doing this, and you're supposed to be protecting us, blah, blah, blah. And an altercation breaks out, and one of them attacks Zeth, and he kills the man with a stone. Very blasphemous, because he has used the stone to murder someone, on top of the fact that he just murdered someone in general, but like it was self-defense. Then this voice starts whispering to him that I think might be the unmade that's in Shinovar, and things are not good. I just wanted to pick little baby Zeth up and hold him. He started cradling the bloody pelt of Molly. Heartbreaking. I had to put the book down for like a day or two after I read that part. So yeah, and then the main other thing that happens in the present with Kaladin and Zeth at the end of day 3 is that they arrive at the first monastery, which is the monastery that in theory is supposed to house the blade of Talon Ellet, I think is how you say his name. They get there, and there's a woman there who has this honor blade, and so Zeth has to fight her. They're fighting, and she's not using Stormlight, but she's using incredible skill and doing all of the things with surges. And so Zeth's like, okay, like, what's going on? She's not using any Stormlight really. And his friend finally tells him he can use his second surge, the surge of division. And so he like basically like explodes and blows her up, and she like kind of disintegrates. And I think it might be she's like a manifestation of the unmade that has taken hold of Shinovar, and she tells him like, your family is waiting. So they figure out, you know, he's gonna have to go to all of these monasteries and cleanse Shinovar of this unmade and collect all of the honor blades. And so that's like his journey to cleanse Shinovar that they are going on together. And then we've got 2 interludes. We've got Baxel, who his name is familiar. I remember the name Baxel, but I can't for the life of me place what interlude he's been in before. He meets with Axes the Collector, who is an Amian, and the Amians are featured in Dawnshard, which is Ryzen's novella. He meets this Axes the Collector. He's maybe not wholly human or mortal anymore. He's like, he has all these like wraps holding him together. I feel like this is just one of those things where I'm forgetting the context. And then we get our next interlude with Odium, aka Taravangian, and he's trying to do what Cultivation has suggested and entertain the fact that he could end this war and pursue peace. But he's also fearful because the power of Odium that he has claimed, he knows prefers Ba'ado Mishram to him. So if it has the chance to bond her instead, he knows that it will take that chance. And then he also meets with the Herald Bata, who is a herald that has basically become corrupt in her time as opposed to just crazy. And basically she agrees to work for Odium, which is kind of the exact opposite of what she's supposed to stand for as a herald. We're on page 417. We are on the beginning of day 4. I actually started day 4 last night. I didn't get super far. I'll talk to you after I finish day 4. Peace out. Okay, gang. It has been another stark jump from one update to another. I think my last update was January 20th, and today is April 6th. But I'm here to tell you that we are officially halfway through. So I have read day 4 and day 5. I'm gonna update you on day 4 right now, and then in the next day or so, I'm hoping to update you on day 5 so that we can officially be at the halfway point of the video. I would show you the physical progress, but I'm actually bouncing my phone on the copy of Wind and Truth that I have. I just went through and transferred all of my annotations from my e-reader to the physical copy that I have. For day 4, we only have a double-sided piece of paper. Day 5 is much longer. Let's just get into it, shall we? I have us starting with Dalinar and Navani's perspective. As we left off last time on day 3, we know Dalinar and Navani, Renarin, Shallan, R'lain, and all of their spren are in the spiritual realm. And Gavinor, but that's a whole other thing because he's kind of just floating in the around in the ether, I guess. Right now, in day 4 at least, that whole gang is in the spiritual realm, but Dalinar and Navani are together and they don't know that Renarin, Shallan, and R'lain, and also Mraize and the Ghostbloods are there. They don't know that anybody else is there, but Shallan and company know that Dalinar and Navani are there because they kind of piggyback off of their perpendicularity opening to get into the spiritual realm. Basically, for much of day 4 and day 5, honestly, we are just following both groups as they are sort of play acting in these visions from the distant past and learning history from the distant past. And so in the first vision that we see them in, they are witnessing the coming of humans to Roshar. So they see a giant portal open in the sky, and they see that the world that the humans are coming from is aflame, it's burning, it's apocalyptic, and they're coming through into Roshar. And what's interesting is in that first vision, Dalinar and Navani are in the bodies of singers because they are viewing it from the native perspective of people coming into Roshar. The goal of Dalinar and Navani is to kind of just piggyback through time across all of these visions to learn about the heralds and the history of Roshar and also the death or the fall of honor. When we first see Renarin, I don't know how to say his name. Is it Renarin? Is it Renarin? I don't listen to the audiobook, so my pronunciation is just whatever the hell my brain wants it to be. Gliss, who is Renarin's spren, is very vocal about being afraid that either cultivation or odium or honor is going to find them in this vision. They're very fearful. Unmade spren in particular are very fearful of, I guess, all of the gods, which is interesting. I understand their tension with odium, but cultivation and honor also they're very afraid of. So being in basically the realm of the gods, they're very afraid that they're going to trip some sort of line and call attention to themselves. As I mentioned, the Stormfather is not at all thrilled with Dalinar's desire to stay in the spiritual realm. He literally offers to help Dalinar and Navani get out of the spiritual realm and get back, but Dalinar declines. He says, I need to know what happens. I need to find the remnants of honor, or we're never going to defeat odium, and I really need to know what happens. So he and the Stormfather get into yet another argument, and the Stormfather kind of abandons him after that. So while they are in the vision of humans coming to Roshar, Shallan and her squad enter the vision, and they are trying to figure out who Mraize, and I'm not even going to bother saying his companion's name because I have literally no idea how to pronounce it. But they are also presumably hiding in this vision because they are following Dalinar around because they think Dalinar is going to lead them to the prison of Mishram. So they're all kind of sneaking around, but they're all masked as characters in these visions, so they don't know who is who. And so Shallan and company are trying to identify Mraize and his assistant, I guess, within the vision. And when they do, Shallan and Mraize kind of get into a little bit of a fight, and it creates some sort of dissonance in the vision because it's obviously off script or off of like whatever would have happened in history while they are fighting, and there's this interaction. Formless pops back up. There's a lot of stuff with Formless in Rhythm of War and how it's this like sort of personality that's threatening to come to the forefront in Shaolin, and it seems to be just like some sort of manifestation of all of her anxieties and negative thoughts. The worst parts of her, I think, are what she views as the worst parts of her, and so she pops back up and Shaolin immediately starts to panic and has to exit the vision. And then at the very end we see Navani grabs a ribbon from Shalash, which is one of the eventual heralds, and they use that physical item as an anchor to a future vision. So they are able to sort of like find a key piece of the vision that will then connect them to another point in time to help them sort of linearly, to a certain extent, jump time. So they're like keeping track of time as this is going on, but time moves a lot slower in the spiritual realm, especially while they're in a vision. That's mostly what we have going on with everybody in the spiritual realm. Now let's go back into the physical realm. Adeline is in Cosmere, obviously, and trying to hold the Oath Gate, or right outside of the Oath Gate in Cosmere, waiting for reinforcements. And in the background, while that's happening, while he's on his breaks from fighting, he's befriending Yanagon. He's just doing his thing, being his charming, darling little self. We love Adeline. So that's really all we have as an update on him. But then we can jump over to the Shattered Plains with Sigzil and like the Windrunners who are battling the Fused and things. Sorry, I had to switch angles on you because that last angle was killing my lower back. Turned 26 and now all of a sudden my body is just revolting. Sigzil and the Windrunners in the Shattered Plains. What's going on with them? Sigzil has come up with like this strategy to defend the different plateaus around, I guess, the center of the Shattered Plains, which is called Narok, I think. But it's a bunch of plateaus gathered together. That's basically the center of the Shattered Plains. And so Sigzil is like, okay, let's like basically set up and make the enemy think that we are putting a lot of our energy into defending this plateau so that they'll attack it, but like we're going to like secretly hope for that. So they're like basically like creating a diversion for the enemy to attack so that they can protect the Oath Gate for longer. And it's working. It's successful. You know, Sigzil is very like academically minded. He likes experimenting. He reminds me a lot of Navani, honestly, but like he's also now captain of the Windrunners, and so he's like trying to boost his confidence a little bit, get used to taking on this new role. Okay, now for what I have, I think, decided is my favorite plotline in the book, and that is the Zeth and Kaladin and Syl parts of the book. I am just positively obsessed with all of their dynamics. I love seeing Cal and Syl growing closer and perhaps into more of a romantic relationship. I love seeing Kaladin and Zeth interact in every capacity. So they are traveling to all the monasteries around Shinovar, collecting the honor blades, getting rid of the presence of this unmade, and they are noticing that like the people are hiding inside during the day and like coming out to work the land at night, because I guess at nighttime they're safer. In the flashbacks, we are picking up after he has killed one of the invaders with a stone, and so because he has subtracted and because he is now considered an outsider in this community in Shinovar, he and his family join basically like the army of people who subtract in Shinovar. So anybody who kills is considered someone who subtracts. They're not adding anything to their community, they're taking away life. But they're also important, which is like an interesting dynamic because they are the defenses for Shinovar, especially when it comes to defending from people who invade like on the coastline. And so now he's part of this army, he has to go, and his family goes with him because his dad insists. He's like, you know, if my son's leaving, I'm going with him. And so his family leave behind their home and they go with him to the army camp, and like they get normal jobs, but Zeth is like enlisted in the army, has to start like doing drills and things like that. But the voice that he heard from the stone has been talking to him. So he has this voice in his head, sort of giving him hints of what he should do. He's like guiding him through a lot of his interactions as he starts training, basically giving him advice to help him rise quickly in his ranks. Okay, and then the last thing, like the finale sort of day 4, one of the honor bearers that is like, I guess, corrupted or possessed by this unmade, pulls him into Shadesmar. And so he's pulled into Shadesmar and has to fight two honor bears who are kind of like ganging up on him, but they're basically ambushing him so that he can't be successful in cleansing Shinovar. And he's like, why are you fighting me? This is dishonorable. And they're like, we never said we were going to be honorable about it. He's kind of like drowning in the beads and he's panicking and he's trying to like find a place inside of the beads where he can breathe. So he's like calling out to his spren like,
hey, I need freaking help or I'm gonna die. Do you want me to die before I can do my job? Go find me a weapon.
And like the spren leaves and brings him back like a fork or a spoon. I can't even remember. One of a ridiculous utensil. His spren acts so high and mighty and like they know best. And in this moment, the high horse attitude of the spren kind of like bleeds away and Zeth realizes that like they don't know anything better than he does. His whole sense of morality and authority and like blindly following the authority of someone else, this is a huge crack to the foundation of that. He ends up winning the fight because Nightblood comes to his rescue. So Nightblood is like talking to him in Shadesmar. He's like, hey Zeth, use me, draw me, let's fight these guys, let's win. And so he finds Nightblood in Shadesmar, and in Shadesmar, Nightblood is like a bright glowing white light instead of like the dark, like smoky, cloudy interpretation that you see in the physical realm. And it's, I guess, because like in Shadesmar, Nightblood appears more how it perceives its own self. And so it's like this glowing, like heroic weapon. Zeth draws Nightblood and he's able to kill both of the honor bears and get both of the honor blades, and so his spren kind of runs away in shame, quote unquote. And that's how day 4 ends. And then quickly we can go through the two interludes. The interludes are Moash's perspective and Odium's perspective. But in Moash's perspective, okay, basically Taravangian Odium turns him into an inquisitor, which if you haven't read Mistborn, you're probably going to be really confused by. I don't know if I would call them undead, but they're these creatures or these beings in the Mistborn universe that have nails for eyes. And so like the introduction of metal is very interesting, but Taravangian turns Moash into an inquisitor and says, okay, I've just given you some serious power, go use it to secure the Shattered Plains for me. And then in the Odium chapter, he goes to see his family, and like he's not like physically there, he's kind of just like floating as an entity, spying on his family basically and like peeking in on them. The fear that he experiences thinking about what might happen to them if he's unsuccessful actually ends up reinforcing his whole shtick about like, I have to be the conqueror of the Cosmere and like unite the Cosmere under one god. All of the Odium perspectives that we get in the interludes are really just like the mind and the heart grappling and him questioning himself and questioning these motives and cultivation, like asking him to question these things, but ultimately him just being like, I have to do this. It's for the good of like my people and for the good of the Cosmere as a whole in his interpretation. But yeah, that's the end of day 4. Tomorrow, hopefully, I'm gonna pop back on and give you a day 5 update. Catch you on the flip. Peace. Okay, it is the next day as promised, and we're at a slightly different angle to go over our day 5 updates. I have 2 double-sided pieces of paper with notes because day 5 was long and a lot of stuff happened. Look at how far we are. This is what almost exactly halfway looks like. You can see we've got our nice little perspective tabs, but then look at this side. This is, hold on, I have to close it to properly show you. Look at all of these things I'm tabbing. There's just so much to notice. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with the perspectives that I have just like a few short things to say, because the majority of day 5 is spent with, I would say, like Dalinar, Navani, and Gavinor, and then Shallan, Renarin, and like their squad, and then also a lot of Venli, and then a lot of Kaladin, Zeth, Syl stuff. There are some other perspectives that are sprinkled in though, so I think let's start there. Let's talk about Sigzil first, I guess. So he is at the Shattered Plains. One of the main things that we see in Sigzil's perspective is that they interact for the first time with a type of fused called the Focused Ones, which are kind of like beings made up of like these like wrappings. Like imagine like a mummy that is inflated like one of those like pufferfish, but then at will they can like contract their bodies to be like really like tight and like pull these like mummy wrappings, and they're really powerful, and fighting them for a long time and like things aren't going super well. But then Sigzil and his spren Vienta, I think is her name. They start to like do some calculations on the fly, and they figure out how to kill one to prove to the army that they can be killed and like boost morale and stuff. But then like at the same time, Sigzil's like, things are like going a little too well, and he can't find or identify any of the heavenly ones. So he sends Layton off to go and find them. And so at one point he's pulled away from the battle, and they go like further on into the Shattered Plains, and they basically find the heavenly ones, and they find a huge army of reinforcements that is basically coming to aid the army of Odium. And they're like, how could they have possibly gotten here? Like, there isn't an oath gate. And so they figure out that somehow the enemy has figured out how to else call, which basically is like create portals. Sigzil and his friend decide that there's only two ways that this could happen. Either they have awoken one of the unmade, or they have the else caller honor blade, and that is what's giving them the ability to do it. But either way, it's really bad. I actually think this is the last chapter in day 5. At the very end, Sigzil sees Moash coming through the portal. So that's all the Sigzil updates. We get like one perspective, one chapter, not even a full chapter, but we do get a little teeny tiny bit of Jasna. She has arrived in Thalenov. Basically, they're just like waiting for the enemy armada to arrive. But at the beginning of the chapter, we find out that Jasna left a note breaking up with Wit. We'll see how that pans out. What's going on with Adolin? He's still in Asmere, still fighting. He started recruiting some of the citizens of Asmere to join the army, because apparently Asmere has like these entrance exams that may or may not be kind of like strict compared to like Alethi standards, and they need fighters. So he starts recruiting people, and he's like picking through the people who have like volunteered to join the army, and there's like some really interesting and fun interactions. There's some trans representation. Sanderson really organically slips in there that I really enjoyed, and like just how seamlessly Adolin is able to like shift like pronouns internally as he's like thinking about interacting with this person. And then he goes back into battle again in Shardplate, and they're fighting, and so there's him and one other shard bearer on the battlefield, and the enemy sort of like collapses on the other shard bearer who's like across the battlefield, and Adolin's like,
Oh shit, like that's really bad. We can't have one of our shard bearers go down.
so he barrels forward, goes through the enemy battlegrounds, busts into their like encampment like tower, goes across it, jumps out and down and around, and like basically like does a U-turn and ends up on the other side of the battlefield to help the other shard bearer. And the reason that he's able to do this is because Notem shows up. And so at the beginning of this like battle, he kind of shows up and starts helping Adolin and like directing him. He mentions that he heard a voice calling him to the battlefield, but it's undetermined yet if it was Maya's voice. Maya has not yet returned from when she went to basically beg Honorspren to come and help them. And Notem decides, he's like, I will be a messenger in your army. I will help fight this battle, but I will not bond a Radiant. And like not everybody is super keen on that. They're like, you really need Radiants, especially Windrunners. But Adolin respects his decision and says, you can be a captain in my army. So I think that brings us back around to big stuff and the stuff that is kind of connecting together, because while Venli is in the physical realm, she's like on the outskirts of the Shattered Plains, and while Dalinar and Navani and then Shalin and company are in the spiritual realm, they're both simultaneously uncovering some secrets that I think are connected and that seem to be connected to each other. Let's start with Venli and the Venli stuff, because this is, I think, the first day where we get any of Venli's perspective. We get a lot of her in Rhythm of War, but she and a bunch of the surviving listeners are sort of like hiding out from Odium and from humans and just living peacefully and symbiotically with chasm fiends, which is really, really interesting. They haven't like domesticated them, I don't think I would say that, but they are living in sort of harmony with these giant chasm fiend beasts. The chasm fiends are definitely assigned some sort of personhood. They're not just beasts to the listeners, at least. They know that they have memories, and they're able to like basically mind meld with listeners to transfer some of their knowledge and memories. And so while we're in Venli's perspective, there's a couple times where she's interacting with the chasm fiends and like getting some of their memories through this weird mind meld situation. Then she's also using her surge binding via Timbra, which is her spren, to like interact with the stones in the Shattered Plains and create these like little like temporary dioramas in the stones that are basically like telling her stories. So we get information, but more than anything, we get more questions from these visions. And some of the main questions that we get are, why are the Shattered Plains specifically, this location that is like pretty barren, why is this so important for form changes? Why is it associated with power? Because, you know, the singers come here to change forms during the high storm, and the chasm fiends go there to like pupate and take on their like adult form, and they like have to go there specifically. So she's like trying to unlock the importance and the significance of the Shattered Plains in particular. And while she's doing that, one of like the visions that she sees in the stones is that there was a city in the Shattered Plains that was built. First singers lived there, and then humans lived there. And then she sees a vision where Honor destroys this city, like completely obliterates it, and that is what is now the Shattered Plains. And so I'm wondering if that's what Dalinar is going to eventually see, or something to this extent, and see maybe even a little bit more behind the scenes of Honor using this power to destroy an entire city and wipe out all these people, and like what are his motivations for that? Because one of the things that Venli realizes is that that almost directly coincides with the timeline of when the heralds left Roshar. So there's a lot of suspect stuff going on there. And I'm like, okay. The last we see of her in day 5 is she's like, okay, we have to go to Narok, which is the center of the Shattered Plains where this huge battle is going on, to uncover some secrets, because the stones are like, we have more stuff to show you, but we can't show you here. We have to show you at like the epicenter of the Shattered Plains. Let's jump right on over to Dalinar and Navani, I guess. So the very first thing is Dalinar and Navani find Gavnor floating around in the ether. So he's kind of just like tagging along through all of these visions with them. In the visions, he keeps appearing as like a weird looking spren. People are always walking past him like, oh, that's a weird looking little spren guy over there, eh? Day 5, we're just watching Dalinar and Navani following the heralds through time, and they're using these physical items to guide where they're gonna go in the next vision, because otherwise like you could go anywhere. In the first vision that they're in, there's a lot of tension between humans and singers, and like they're fighting for territory. Humans are starting to die off, and so they're like, we have to push further inland. So we're seeing that like a battle is on the horizon and things are really gonna start hitting the fan. But then the next vision that they're in, it's after humans and singers have started fighting and a war has begun, and Odium is starting to turn some of the singers into like these immortal beings that keep regenerating, and they're winning the battle quite easily because of it. And so the whole vision and this big reveal is that Dalinar and Navani get to witness the Oath Pact being created. And so like Honor shows up, and they see this moment where all 10 of the heralds pledge themselves to Honor and create this like binding oath pact so that they can become immortal. And so in this vision, Dalinar is the herald Kelek, and so in the vision he gets the Honor blade that is created, and so he's now like, okay, this is what I actually need, because this Honor blade is going to be his anchor, that he can jump through time and watch all of these desolations playing out. But then at the same time that Dalinar and Navani are in this vision, we also have all the other spiritual realm gang are also in this vision, unbeknownst to Dalinar and Navani. Renarin and Relaine are play acting 2 of the heralds in this vision, and at the beginning of the vision, before the actual like oath pact situation really starts and they find each other, Renarin and Relaine are like in this tent, and Renarin tells him that he has like this weird surge binding ability where it's like it's supposed to be light weaving, but what's actually happening is he's able to use these like glowing orbs to identify a person's soul. And so he's like, oh, I could use this power to help us figure out who is who in these visions, because it's going to show me their soul even though their face is like a mask, because they're playing a part in the vision. And so Relaine is like practicing using the same magic that Renarin shows him, and when Renarin comes back to check on him, I don't know if it's showing his soul or if it's showing Renarin's soul, but there's a little orb and it's the 2 of them kissing. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna scream at the top of my lungs. They don't even really have a chance to process it though, because like as soon as Renarin realizes what's going on, all of the like heralds come in and this huge event from history starts playing out before them. So I'm very interested to see what happens next. And then at the same time, Challen obviously is also in these visions. There's a point in the scene where some of the heralds break off, and that's like Dalinar and Navani, they break off and go somewhere else. And then we find out that Mraize is acting the part of Honor. So there's a battle in the tent where Mraize and Shallan start fighting. And Shallan has the void light spear, the anti-light dagger or whatever. And they start fighting and she stabs him. Mraize is like, Shallan, I'm on your side, or like, we're not enemies in this. He's like, you know, why do you think I'm here? Why do you think I want to find Mishram's prison? And it dawns on her, if Odium wanted Mishram to be free, he would have freed her. And there's this really iconic moment where Shallan's like, I know why Odium is so afraid, and he should be afraid. Parents should fear their children. And it's just like this like weighted iconic moment where like she's talking about herself and her parents. She's talking about Mraize as like her mentor, other mentors in her life that she feels as though she's betrayed, and how she is like the child, the product of them, and how they should be fearful of her. But she's also talking about the gods throughout history and Adonalisium, but how basically he was destroyed by humans because he created humans. But then, as things are going really well for Shallan, Formless pops up again. So she panics and she has Gliss pull her out of the dream. I hate to see her struggling because she came so far in Rhythm of War, and I want everything to be fixed for her. I don't want her to have any problems. But I think that's basically everything as far as the spiritual realm stuff that we have to go over, which leaves us again with my little baby boys, Szeth and Kaladin. Let's start with the Szeth flashback stuff. We're really starting to unravel a lot of his issues with morality and what is right, what is wrong, and truth versus truthlessness. It's very easy to see why he relies so much on authority figures in his life that he can follow, rules that he can follow, beings that he can follow that will tell him exactly what to do, because the idea that you could make wrong choices terrifies him. We're following him as he's older now. I think he's like 19. And he is leading this regiment of warriors, of soldiers, to defend the coastline. The general or whoever's in charge of him tells him like, okay, I want you to go and like keep watch and protect the coastline and protect Shinovar. And so the Unmade kind of twists that order for him and says, okay, what we're gonna do is we are going to launch this secret operative mission, and we're going to burn the enemy ships and send back survivors, basically saying like no one's gonna with Shinovar anymore. And so that's more or less what they do. I think someone gets captured on the third ship and Szeth goes to save them. He gets like stabbed and is like dying, and then the Unmade is like, okay, like you've proven yourself, do you want a second chance? And then I think the Unmade basically like revives him and heals him. Then when he gets back, everybody's mad at him. They're like, why would you do that? They're gonna come back with twice as many ships and they're gonna retaliate. And so he's waiting to get this punishment. In this meeting, there are two of the honor bearers, the honor blade bearers there, and when they hear the voice talking to Szeth, they're like, oh, how long has this voice been talking to you? How do you have access to this? And so they take Szeth and are like, okay, you're an acolyte now. You're going to train to become a shaman. You're going to train to use all the honor blades. But then in the present timeline, these scenes with Kaladin and Szeth are just like emotional gut punches. There's this moment where, you know, Szeth is like casually talking to Kaladin. He's like,
your advice has really been helping me, and I've decided that after all this is over, I'm just going to, you know, take my life and move on with things.
And Kaladin is obviously upset by that. And he's like,
That's the opposite of what I've been saying to you.
then they arrive at this monastery that's on a river. I think this is probably the first place that Szeth is taken after the scene that we see where the Unmade and the honor bearers come and get him, because he goes into this abandoned monastery and he takes this false brick out of a wall, and hidden in the wall is the little tiny sheep toy made of Molly's wool. That physically, like, my heart dropped into my stomach. And when he takes this childhood memento, this thing that symbolizes so much of when his life started to really go downhill, he just like falls to the floor and starts weeping. I thought Shallan and Kaladin were messed up. Szeth is like one of those impossible knots, so tangled up and messed up, and just Brandon Sanderson is just slowly, delicately, with not a care in the world, just undoing him in front of us, and we just have to watch it. But that's not even the worst part, because then after he starts crying, Kaladin is like,
Szeth, you're a person. You deserve to be happy.
so they're like arguing, and Kaladin's trying so desperately to convince him that he deserves happiness, that he deserves free will and choice, and just because you've done bad things, just because you've killed people in the past, just says do better. This is your chance to do better and move forward. There's this moment where Kaladin pulls out his hand and like offers it to Szeth, and Szeth takes it and then pulls him into a hug and starts crying. They're hugging, things are going well. Kaladin has finally convinced him that his spren is wrong and that these thoughts that he has had his whole life are wrong. And then the Herald, Skybreaker, Nal, whatever his name is, he shows up because Szeth's spren is a little snitch, ran off to tell him that Szeth was starting to doubt his oaths and all that as a Skybreaker, and that Kaladin's like putting all these crazy ideas in his head. Let me tell you what, snitches get stitches, and I'm gonna that little spren up, I swear to God. And then last, but certainly not least, we've got two very short but very disturbing interludes to talk about. So the first interlude is Zahil, aka Vasher. He is being held and tortured by someone named Axendweth. I don't know if I'm supposed to know who that is, but I don't. But basically, yeah, he's being held and being tortured, and the person is trying to get him to give up his breaths. And at the end of the interlude, he has not given in yet, but I'm very nervous for what the future holds for little Vasher, maybe. And then even scarier, we have our Odium POV in this interlude. He basically has decided to unite these two disparate parts of himself, the mind and the heart, under the belief that he has to become a conqueror. He has to become the one and only god of the Cosmere and conquer the Cosmere, because that is just the best way to do it. He says, there are two people on this planet that I respect almost enough to be my equals, and they are Dalinar and Jasnakolan, and I have to teach them a lesson. And that is terrifying. That's the end of this update. It is a lot. Day 5 is a really long day. I feel like we're at the point where shit is really close to hitting the fan. Day 6, here we come. Peace out. We have reached the end of this video, which means that we have reached the official halfway point. I'm nervous. I'm nervous for things to come, but we're gonna do it together. Thank you so much for watching this video. It always means the world to me when anybody watches anything that I have ever created and engages with it in any way. But this video and these videos specifically, because they require so much editing and so much filming in general, it touches my heart when someone enjoys it. So if you do enjoy it, please let me know. But again, thank you so much if you made it this far into this video, which is a billion years long. I appreciate you so very much. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if that's your jam. And I will see you in my next video, which will be the second half of this vlog. Peace out.